Hello, and welcome to Other Project Elements. My name is Sarah Conrad, and I am the Associate Project Director for Wyoming EPSCoR. So our project elements are split into two major thrusts. The first, Thrust 5A, deals with all of our projects related to the Wind River Indian Reservation located in central Wyoming. And Thrust 5B really covers all the other projects associated with other Wyoming communities and businesses across the state. We put a lot of effort into making sure that our other project elements were well integrated with our research theme. And the way we did that was by a two-part RFP process. So we put out the initial RFP, came up with a really solid science idea that we were happy with, put together that team. And as soon as that felt solid and we were good with that, we put out a second RFP asking for other project elements that tied in, integrated with that project theme. When we evaluated all those proposals, we looked for a good fit with the science, and we also wanted to have a champion from the science team of that other project element so that there would continue to be good integration throughout the 5 years of the project. So the different elements that we have cover all of these areas of workforce, diversity, education, communication, and partnerships. And this little blue square up in the corner, you will see that throughout the talk today, highlighting the different tie-ins of each project element. So I'm going to just give you a really quick introduction to the projects that we'll be hearing about today and the faces that go with those projects, some of which you will hear from today, some of which will be present on the 31st. But it's a really big and diverse team. So first, with workforce and economic development, we have an internship program with a local business. We have several entrepreneurial competitions. We have a STEM journalism program, and then we have the Data Science Center, which you heard about already in the research talk. Our diversity programs include SRAP, also known as the Summer Research Apprenticeship Program, Hard of Hearing internships, and all of our different diverse programs associated with the Wind River Indian Reservation. Communication and dissemination has two different projects: Science Loves Art, integration of science and art in our community and going across the state, and our partnership with journalism and the Wyoming Press Association, also integrated across the state. Finally, our education programs are quite broad. We have the data discovery tool, we have the Wyoming Science Fair, we have undergraduate research and inquiry days, we have a partnership with our community colleges, class specifically to STEM journalism, and another art project known as Microbestiary. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Teresa Spoonhunter, who is at Central Wyoming Community College and is really the heart and soul of our Wind River Indian Reservation program. Teresa.
This is Dr. Teresa Spoonhunter from Central Wyoming College, and the Wind River Indian Reservation includes the Northern Arapaho tribe and the Eastern Shoshone tribe in Wyoming. So when we talk about traditional ecological knowledge, when we begin the ceremony, we call upon the water and the water animals, the sky people, the animals of this land, the plants, the rocks, and so forth, with the humans being the last to be called upon until all have arrived and taken their place in the lodge. Without the environment and its beings, we could not have this ceremony. So this is the beginning of the thunderpipe ceremony that takes place every year after the first thunder for the Blackfeet people. But I feel like this, just how this ceremony begins, you start to see how the humans have a relationship not only with water and animals, but plants, the land, the spiritual aspects, but also the physical aspects that, many tribes have in their traditional landscape, their traditional area. For if it wasn't for all these things, the humans, the native people, would not have survived in the mountain areas that they live in, that they chose to live upon on the Wind River Indian Reservation. So, Dos, Nanana Niehi Bikana Hisse. My name is Eagle Plume Woman. my Blackfeet name, Nato Yaki. I grew up on the Blackfeet Indian Reservation near Glacier National Park, but I currently reside on the Wind River Indian Reservation in Wyoming. I'm a professor at Central Wyoming College. I've been there for 6 years and doing some partnership work with the University of Wyoming and the Arapaho and Shoshone tribes on the Wind River Indian Reservation. When I talk about my upbringing, I grew up on the Blackfeet Indian Reservation and attended a public school. In that time, from K through 12, I maybe had 3 Native teachers. And rarely did they ever talk about Blackfeet way of life or Indian way of life in the classroom. The education was primary education, English, social studies, math, science. But even though it was a reservation school, they didn't incorporate a lot of the traditional uses, traditional way of life, traditional seasons, the bundles, the ceremonies. They really kind of created a lot of disconnect for tribal students and even the community. And yet, as you know, time has evolved, we're starting to see Tribal Colleges Act in 1975 under the Indian Education and Assistance Act was passed, where a lot of tribes were able to set up their own tribal colleges, which allowed them to make traditional ecological knowledge relevant and a part of higher education. In recent years, we've seen the Indian Education for All Act, where some states such as Montana are requiring public instruction to start to incorporate TEK, history, tribal languages in public schools, and that's just not on the 7 reservations in Montana, but in the classroom. You're starting to see in Montana the Indian Education for All is being incorporated into math, English, social studies, history, and the state is actually paying for it and funding a lot of this Indian Education for All across the state. The curriculum is being developed by tribal educators, and then the state of Montana Education Department then packages it and sends it out to all the public schools in Montana. Well, in Wyoming, 2 years ago, they finally passed the Indian Education for All, but only for social studies. So we're a little bit behind, but we can still see that there is a lot of value in traditional ecological knowledge in STEM programs, science, technology, engineering, and math. We now have an Applied American Indian Studies bachelor's program that is rolling out this fall. And so we're going to incorporate our partnerships with water resources, the Tribal Water Engineers Office, Fish and Game. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that partnership. But, you know, we're starting to see that not only education, but partners, researchers are starting to kind of give support for traditional ecological knowledge. We're seeing the state of California asking tribes, how did you manage your forests? I will tell you that we didn't do prescribed burning in the spring and fall when the weather is the most changing and unpredictable. A lot of tribes, you know, did their burning in the winter. When an area got breeded by weeds, you know, they burn that area to replenish the ecosystem. And so, you know, tribes had lived, you know, in their traditional landscape with their traditional worldviews for generations. And only in recent years, we're starting to see and be acknowledged for our contributions, not only to science and medicine, but, you know, to the management of land, to the management of water. I know one of the values as Blackfeet people is we have to keep the waters clean. That's a value as a thunder pipe holder. But here in the United States, we're starting to see where researchers have come to tribes and they've come to an elder or bundle holder and said, hey, I want to know about these animals. But yet, when we talk about the ceremony, we've seen that the ceremony incorporates water, animals, plants, rocks, all these things are kind of give a holistic view of what's important and how everything is related and tied together. But yet in science, when we become a scientist, we're professionals in our field, in our science, in the field that we study. We don't necessarily feel comfortable in going outside, our train of thought, our profession. But yet, as Native people, so we have someone come to an elder and say, I want to know about plants. And the next day we have someone come in asking, I want to know about animals. The next day we want to have someone come in that wants to know about archaeology sites. So in some ways it's like, okay, who's coming? Let me put on my other hat. And it's almost created like the schizophrenic, rather than just sitting there listening to the story, the ceremony, the TEK, that everything is related and tied together. And yes, everything has their own value, but there's also a bigger community knowledge that as Native people, we have to respect. We can't just say, oh, only this animal's important without taking into effect that other things are just as important. Other animals are just important. And you'll see that across tribes. In some tribes, some animals may be respected a lot more than other tribes, just depending on their worldview, in their environment, and who their helpers were, in their communities. So when we talk about plants and animals, as Native people, they have sources of power. There's a timelessness about animals that as humans, we believe that animals and plants were here long before us. And if it wasn't for the animals and plants, we would not have survived. And so we still have to pay our respects because we have used them. They have given themselves to Native people for food, healing, shelter, and survival. At the age of 9, I was given this name, Medicine Beaver Woman, Nato-Sixtakyaki in Blackfeet. And at age 9, I didn't really understand the meaning, but as I knew it was of value. And so one of the Blackfeet ways of knowing, or the Blackfeet kind of grooming children, is they select children at a young age and they start to groom them. And one of them is by naming them. And so the beaver bundle is made up of many animal skins, different animal skins. It's open when the beavers leave their den, when the ice melts or the waters are high. The Blackfeet depended on the beaver bundle to help in times of war, sickness, used to entice the buffalo, and tribal well-being. Well, each item in this bundle has its own songs. There's over 200 songs in this ceremony. Each item has a song and a dance, and it takes a lifetime learning. It's not just a 4-year degree. To become a beaver bundle someone of knowledge, you would have to have made the vow, and typically it was 4 years. Some people keep it longer, sometimes it's less. You would take the vow to become a beaver holder, meaning that you're going to learn about the ceremony. Then you may be a bundle holder for 4 more years. Then you have to transfer that bundle to the next person, and you're their helper. Well, when that person transfers, then you become the elder, or for instance, the PhD, right? So, this ceremony has a very limited knowledge to those who make that vow. So it's something that's not openly shared, but it encompasses a lot of the worldview and the teachings. It's almost like the, primary education, high school, bachelor's, master's, and PhD, that you've had to put in the work to become that PhD or that wisdom keeper of this ceremony. So this beaver bundle is very important to the Blackfeet people. And as I went through the public school system, I start to realize the importance and the value of my name. And in some ways, it guided my pathway into education. As a beaver woman with the name of Holy Beaver Woman, I had to be generous. I had to be kind. In whatever field I chose, I had to come back and help my tribe. And, as time went on, Sometimes I was like, why am I in a Western education system is not necessarily teaching me how to help my tribe? How do I make that connection? Because I said in K through 12, there was a very disconnection between your tribal way of life and your public education. And so, that's been a struggle for most Native people in Western education, is making those connections, even though both have value, in your educational journey. It's been very difficult for Native people to find those connections and be able to make a Western education relevant on the reservation. So, in this traditional ecological knowledge, we've really tried to make those connections and start to bring in researchers that can respect that TEK, but can respect that beaver bundle, that can respect those wisdom keepers. They may not have the research education, they may not have the bachelor's, the master's, the PhD, but the information they have was a lifetime learning of this beaver bundle. They can explain to you all these animals, all these rocks, the relationship with water and why they don't eat, underwater beings, on why clean water is important. I mean, just in this ceremony alone, you would learn everything there is to know about, the beaver bundle and the Blackfeet connection to their landscape. And so in some ways, this name really kind of guided me to be who I am today, and try to help my people in understanding that STEM has value in Native communities. And how do we make those connections of science, technology, engineering, math? Well, we've done it. We just haven't called it STEM. We've called it traditional ecological knowledge, cultural ways of knowing, the beaver bundle, the thunderpipe bundle, the Sundance. Those are those lifetime learning, those PhDs in Native communities. So through this wisdom, we've been able to identify physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health as a necessity to being someone that can come back and use your education to help your people. I achieved, the right to wear a straight up war bonnet. They granted that to me, not only as Natosik Stakiaki, medicine beaver woman, but as Dr. Teresa Spoonhunter, who received a PhD and has used her education to come back and educate and help her people. This is my family hiking at the sacred mountain of Chief Mountain, which is the Blackfeet Sacred Mountain located in Glacier National Park. There's been some access denial, some denial of Blackfeet rights, but as Blackfeet people, we have maintained those rights. This is my uncle, who you can see is wearing a buckskin outfit and a headdress. And you can see the headdress is made out of eagle feathers and plumes. The beads were trade, but the designs all represent the Blackfeet way of life. The florals represent the mountain florals that the Blackfeet use. This is my daughter, who picks Savis berries. Berries is a very sacred food item in ceremonies throughout Blackfeet way of life. And so in order for you to be ready for the year, they want you to gather at least 4 to 5 gallons of berries that you process and you freeze. And throughout the year, you'll have to use some of those berries to provide, the berry soup that is required for coming of age, young men, young women, opening the beaver bundle, putting the bundles to sleep, night lodges, different dances, birthdays. Those are the times that these berries and these plants are used throughout Blackfeet way of life. Some of the things that, we've been able to do is we've been able to have some TEK workshops, in the community, looking at, this is a example. This day was called Food Sovereignty, where, kids were able, and grandparents and students were able to shuck corn, cut dry meat in the back. And then this is another time where we took some of our students out to a fish ladder. And, one of the things that I kind of want to talk about, it's one thing to talk about water rights and the importance of water, because we know as Native people, water is important. We use water in every single ceremony. But, you know, there's a battle over water resources in the state of Wyoming. And it's been a battle that the state of Wyoming has taken the tribe to court 8 times, you know. I think 2 times maybe the tribe went back because, you know, they didn't receive all their water rights. But, you know, it's one thing to talk about it. And one of the students, you know, when, you know, we had a day of lecture, these are the water rights, this is water settlements, this is getting taken to court. But once they were up and, you know, viewing the water, you know, they said, man, being here makes it real. Having this hands-on, touching the water after hearing all these legal battles, you know, all these struggles to have clean water on the Wind River Reservation, to have water for our outlying communities, the struggles that our water engineer has faced, you know, and it started to make more sense and how important it is, you know, for our own people to become engineers, before our own people become biologists, you know. So we're starting to see that, you know, people are starting to wake up because we're providing them experiences and making that connection between TEK and STEM. The 1868 treaties, the Eastern Shoshone, you see their reservation was reduced from the 44 million to 3.2. That's a lot of land, but yet that 1863 land is still considered their traditional territory that they use, and they must be consulted in any undertakings and developments on federal lands on traditional lands under the National Preservation Act. Gold was discovered, and that's why, you know, their reservation got reduced. The Northern Arapaho actually signed the Great Sioux Treaty of 1868. They didn't have a reservation. They were looking at one on the North Platte River. But in 1877, Black Hole asking for land, and they said, well, we'll put you temporarily on the Wind River Indian Reservation. So they arrived on the Wind River Reservation in 1878, and eventually they end up buying the eastern half of the Wind River Indian Reservation from the Shoshone. So the Shoshone was paid so the Arapahos could have the eastern half of the reservation. So under the treaty, we get into the reserved rights doctrine. This is basically saying that the U.S. government must supply the tribes of their central wants. If they're confining them to a reservation, then, you know, they started providing services such as Indian health, education. Some people receive the USDA, you know, food packages, but not, you know, that's income-based now. But at one time, you know, all the tribal people were able to receive those. That the U.S. government would manage their affairs through treaty provisions, making sure that their, you know, healthcare was upkept, their education, and that they would live up to the obligations under treaties. This established a trust relationship that the tribe entrusted the U.S. government to make sure that these treaties were met. It's not a grant of rights to Indians, but a grant from them. So a lot of times you hear people saying, well, we gave them reservations. Well, we gave them services. Well, we gave them this. Not necessarily. The tribes chose where they wanted their reservation, except for the Arapaho, but most tribes chose, you know, the area where they wanted to live. And a lot of it was where they gathered plants, where they could hunt, where there was water, where there was access, you know, to resources. They did not give up. Whatever they did not give up is retained by the tribe. So you see some tribes still have oil and gas rights on ceded lands outside the reservation. And this is part of their self-government and recognize them as a sovereign nation, establishing that government-to-government relationship, that political relationship. Some of the work that we've been able to do here on the Wind River Reservation was trying to build capacity and create partnerships. We had our science team who came out and visited in December. You can see there's snow on the ground. Our buffalo, the Eastern Shoshone, brought back buffalo a few years ago. So, another partnership that we were able to create was with the Tribal Water Engineers Office. The tribe has a reserve water right. They manage all the rights, and they are actually the senior water user in the state of Wyoming. The tribe is supposed to get their water before outlying communities, before the state of Wyoming. The only other tribe that has a more senior right is the Crow tribe, because their treaty was signed in 1855, whereas the Shoshones was in 1863. So that's where your reserve water right dates back to. The tribes has always shared their resources. They've always shared water. They would never deny their neighbor water, because as a traditional value, you do not bring suffering onto others, otherwise it will come back on you. And to this day, the tribe still carries that value, that even though in times of drought, they could call the river, meaning that the tribe would get all the water before all the ranchers, before all the communities downstream. But the reality of that happening, it hasn't happened. And we've been in drought a few times. We're actually in drought. So one of the things that we were able to do with the Tribal Water Engineers Office is to allow our students to sit in on some of the drought planning for the Wind River Indian Reservation. They were able to show how important water is from the water engineer, from biologists, from state officials. Again, we've partnered with the Bison Range on the Wind River Reservation. We had the first 12 buffalo in 2016 with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the National Wildlife Federation, and the Arapaho also received 11 more buffalo and established their own herd on October 16, 2019. So even though this is in the beginning stages, we've been able to partner with Jason Valdez, who's always been, a good partner to us throughout the University of Wyoming and CWC and the Wind River Tribal College, and really trying to educate the importance of bison. So we decided to have a Bison Research Day. Jason has been a great team member. He allowed, our scientists, I had asked them, in his research, he had found that the wallows of the bison, you can see on this area where, this is a wallow where a bison kind of rolls on its back. But through that practice of the buffalo, what seems to happen is water accumulates in there as the indentations. And some of the cultural plants that the tribes rely on tend to grow a lot grow in these wallows. And so, although these buffalo only been here a couple of years, in the preliminary findings, there's, the scientists, the UW scientists said, the nutrients are a little bit healthier in this wallow versus being out here on the plains. So here's a data slide comparison of soil variables between the wallow and the adjacent non-wallow plots. The students were able to have a hands-on activity. Our tribal students, were very glad to get out of the lab, right, and do some actual science. And so this is why it's really important to give on these hands-on activities. So our next partner was with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, hosting the student interns. We had convinced him, twisted his arm, if he would be able to allow our students to have more hands-on activities. Our STEM numbers were really low, not only at Central Wyoming College, but also the University of Wyoming. And so he's like, well, let's try to get some of these students that are undecided, such as, freshmen, sophomores at Central, and give them some hands-on experience. And just kind of get them into what is research, And so here we have some students doing some soil sampling, water sampling here at the glacier. Here's one of our students doing some work with fisheries. Here's another student helping with some collaring of mule deer. She also got to work with some collaring on elk and bighorn sheep. And one of the things that, as, research institution, we started to find that the tribe was very hesitant for research to come in because they don't have their own institutional review board. That's been one of the issues. And so in this current project, we realized that, we need to help them build capacity. And so right now we've reached out to the TIPO in both tribes, Fish and Game, to really talk about what is research and how can we make the research valuable to the people on the Wind River Indian Reservation, where it's an equal partnership and not just the researchers coming in and doing their research and leaving the community, but making sure that the community is involved and that we're giving them the opportunity to have valuable research for their needs, not necessarily the researchers' needs. And so this has been really important and eye-opening for us to be able to start to build these relationships and partnerships and rebuild that trust relationship again with tribes who, a lot of them, like I said, are hesitant about research. We've also had some community partners working with Wyoming Public Lands and looking at some of the land names are the names throughout Wyoming that may have been derogatory or racist towards tribal people. So we had a student that interned there and was, looking at some of the creeks, the mountains, the rivers that had derogatory tribal names and, trying to partner with the tribe to find, if they would have an interest in helping renaming some of these land areas or land monuments, creeks, rivers, roads. Our partnership, we've been able to provide a GIS for the Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho TIPO offices. They employ up to 20 techs in GIS in the summer. And so one of the things we were able to bring in an outside person and allow for some GIS training for a week-long training that would assist them in some of their work that they do throughout surveying throughout the summer and for the land surveys they do throughout the state of Wyoming. Here's some more pictures of some TEK. Our students here were helping Fish and Wildlife set a grizzly bear culvert trap. This is another person picking choke cherries. And here's the teepee, our students putting up a teepee. And our last, partner on the Wind River Reservation was these microgrants for STEM and traditional ecological knowledge. So really trying to get the community involved. So we have a few projects that have taken place this summer and the last year, looking at stories or lifeways using oral tradition and traditional ecological knowledge. This was a grant that was awarded to the Wind River Tribal College, and finding TEK and some of the elders, doing interviews. The first elder that came in was, and we were, they were explaining to them, well, we want to show how STEM is related to our way of life, our TEK. And he is like, we are STEM, there was no doubts in his mind. He's like, our lifeway is STEM. And we said, well, we need you to help get that generational knowledge to the next generation and the next generation, because a lot of our students are shying away from STEM. There's like, oh, I'm not good at math. Oh, I'm not good at science. I don't know if I could do this. But yet, their daily life, they are living STEM when they're gathering plants, when they're putting up teepees, when they're putting up the sweat lodge, when they're gathering foods, when they're hunting. Those are STEM, but yet for years, the public education has basically said your traditional way of life has no value to Western education. But yet we're the most researched people here in the United States. So, it's always been to the benefit of Western education and not necessarily for the tribal. And so this was an opportunity for tribes to really kind of, use these micro grants in order to bring in some of this TEK and, acknowledge the importance of TEK in STEM. We had support for robotics, for the high school robotics. We have a group of students, I think they said they take up to 12 students in robotics from Wyoming Indian High School. And then we had another micro grant for mental health, developing an app so students would be able to see, do a little bit of technology, in order to help develop an app. And then we have another proposal of looking at traditional ecological knowledge on film, short films, looking at how tribes use porcupine, looking at porcupine habitats. Tribal people use porcupine hair and quills for their traditional dress, their headdresses, and, you know, adornments. There's some very good quill workers on the Wind River Indian Reservation, some very good roach makers on the Wind River Reservation. Hopefully by next year we'll have some, you know, pictures and little short videos to share. Another film or project is looking at the water quality. Again, this is a very important issue for the Wind River Indian Reservation. And unless you work in the TWE, you really don't, most people don't know much about water quality on the Wind River Indian Reservation. And so we've had a past leader say, hey, you know what, I want to develop a curriculum, you know, for the schools, you know, to start looking at the water quality on the Wind River Indian Reservation. We have the Buffalo Box. We have each school would hopefully have a Buffalo Box by the end of this project on the Wind River Reservation. So we've been collecting some items to be able to put these Buffalo Boxes together for students to learn about science, technology, engineering, math around Buffalo, and also food sovereignty, you know, fish and game, you know, hunting, gathering of plants. A lot of our people are now currently fighting over chokecherry patches and where to gather, and keeping their secret gathering places from others. So they can get their plants, get their sage and their cedar. You know, one of the things they're saying right now is that sage is very important to the people in helping them fight COVID-19. So you can see that our traditional way of life is still relevant and still a part of our daily living. We also had some outside the box grants for UW faculty. The first round was looking at preserving Indigenous food knowledge, a community-based participatory research project. And this is looking at Shoshone traditional foods. They have gathered plants in the mountain areas and really giving people the opportunity to come in and, you know, share some of their gathering, processing for traditional foods found out in not only in the land, but up in the mountains. Another project is looking at tracking alterations in stream microbial communities upon produced water introduction. So these proposals were, excuse me, reviewed by one member of the Shoshone tribe who was a lawyer, and another a member of the Arapaho tribe who worked for the Tribal Historic Preservation's Office. We had these two individuals kind of give feedback to both projects and how to make sure that it pays respect to the tribe, and that the tribe also is able to have the same, you know, have the information, have the data stored at the Wind River Tribal College. So that kind of brought about, you know, the need for the tribe to, the need for the research team to make sure that all data collected is shared with the Wind River Indian Reservation. We've also done some entrepreneurship and economic development. Reservation economic development, brought in a group of people, past leaders, water board, lawyers, tribal water engineer, the Tribal Economic Development Committee. All these people have worked in economic development on the Wind River Reservation, and just try to help them, you know, kind of come up with, you know, what is the current status of economic development on the Wind River Reservation. So we've been able to be a partner with them, not necessarily, you know, telling them what to do, but letting them kind of explain some of the things that have worked, may have not worked, or may need, you know, some revitalization. And through that, we've been able to have presentations by the Arapaho branch, who was a primarily raised beef, grass-fed beef, and so they've been able to sell the beef throughout the U.S., and a lot of people actually seek grass-fed beef. And so they've been able to maintain themselves. The Arapahoe Ranch, we have the makerspace that's pretty much open to the community, now located next to CWC. So hopefully we'll get a little bit more partnership coming. And a lot of this we focused on tribal resource management and nation building, and how we help the tribe, be nation builders and rebuilding and protecting, not only managing tribal resources, but protecting those important resources that the tribe relies on for maybe not necessarily Western mindset, but for tribal mindset, cultural resource management. We were a partner in the Wind River Startup Challenge. We had our first year and awards at the end of May this year, and had some really good positive feedback on this event. Currently, we have partnered with Montana, Idaho, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, New Mexico to do a project called Cultivating Indigenous Research Communities for Leadership in Education and STEM Circles. So not only are STEM numbers down in Wyoming, but they're down in Montana, Idaho, North Dakota, South Dakota, New Mexico. The primary focus is to access to technology, foundational support for culturally relevant STEM project, working across institutions to support research. So this is a group that's kind of trying to come together and identify where is those resources for not only tribal students, but professors. How do those professors, such as our chemists, be able to make those connections into tribal communities? Research in tribal communities driven by the needs of the tribal programs to increase. It's only a one-year project, but it's enough to hopefully bring in varying perspectives and really bring some relevancy to how TEK is just as valuable as STEM in Western education. This is our strategic plan check. So as you can see, most of us were kind of in yellow. We're moving along. We had, some really good things with the startup challenge. Some of our workshops, were able to happen. We did have some issues with our micro grants, but like I said, we're slowly moving forward and getting those grants out and going. We've been collaborating, making sure we're offering student opportunities on the Wind River Reservation. Our mentoring program has been successful, even more so that now, we've had not only local, but we've had possible the AMK Ranch as a partner for next year to start doing some mentoring for some of our students in fisheries and aquatics. And we're continuing to recruit students for CWC environmental tech programs and expedition science. Our activities, having partnerships with UW STEM faculty researchers, we were able to have the outside the box proposals to try to create partnerships with some of the faculty at UW and the Wind River Indian Reservation. Host microbiome science camp and the Wind River Indian Reservation team. Because of COVID, this has been put on hold, but we're still trying to move forward and support some of this work through the Teton Science School at the Grand Tetons. Came to the Wind River Indian Reservation to do some of their a week-long science school for students in middle school. So we've been able to work with both Eastern Shoshone and Sky people to create appropriate and consumable resources for students and teachers online, plant, soils, drones, data collection, analysis are topics of development. So we're currently hoping to plan in-person workshops for next spring and summer. But in the meantime, we're trying to be creative and do these individual projects through the micro grants and the TEK film.
Thank you, Teresa, for that enlightening presentation. We'll switch gears now into Thrust 5B, starting with workforce development. First, we have Dr. Trent McDonald, who is a statistician at West Inc. which is a company of environmental and statistical consultants headquartered here in Wyoming. Trent?
Thank you, Sarah. I have been tasked with two objectives related to the EPSCoR program here at the University of Wyoming. First task is to create and implement statistical short courses for the people here in Wyoming to provide some additional training around those topics. Second thing that I've been tasked with is to employ undergraduate and graduate students as interns here at our statistical consulting firm based in Laramie, Wyoming. Give them a little bit more training in data science and statistics. So I'm happy to report on both of those projects. On the short course side, we've developed 3 courses, one on sampling theory, just base sampling theory, and we've taught that workshop 3 times, once in Laramie, once in Reno, and then online in June 10th of this year. We developed another sampling course. It's called distance sampling, and that is a method that we use in ecology for analyzing things that need to be sighted at distance, things like plants or trees or birds. The last course that we developed was a course on Bayesian methods, just an introduction to Bayesian methods. Bayesian methods are the core of what's going on over on the science arm of the EOD project. And we've offered that once, and we're planning on offering that again here in the near future. If you're interested, there is a link at the bottom with a password that will allow you to view the recording of our last sampling workshop. You can get a flavor for what goes on there. I'm not sure you want to sit through all 6 hours of it. We estimate that there's 200 to 250 people grand total that have taken our workshops throughout the times that we've given them. On the intern side, we have hosted 3 interns in 2018, 5 in 2019, and 4 this summer. The current crop of interns is pictured there on the left. Will, Stephen, and Reed. The kind of tasks that these interns do are data related, they're statistics related. Well, there's a wide variety of tasks that they do. Most of it is coding, most of it is working in R, most of it is working with other people and collaborating with them, which means they're version controlling and that sort of thing, making commits and working on communication skills, both the written and verbal. We've also, though, on times sent people into the field. Will, the taller gentleman there on the left, just got back from Pinedale, Wyoming, where he was collecting data on prairie dogs. He brought that data back to the office. He entered that data. He cleaned it up. He put it into an analyzable form, all in R, and now he's analyzing it for us. That's a typical workflow for us and the projects that we do here at West. I'm happy to report that the summer intern program at West has become normal for us. We had an intern program before, but it was sporadic, between 0 and 1 intern per summer. We have become dependent upon them, that influx of labor in the summertime, which is typically a busy time for us. That has become normal. We depend upon it, and I am confident that the intern program will continue even without the EPSCoR funding that is helping to fund those interns in current years. Of the past interns, 3 went on to PhD programs, 2 returned to school. They're still in school here at UW, and then 3, we hired 3 of them. They are now working for us part-time, all 3 of them part-time, but mostly they're putting in 30 to 40 hours worth of work every week. We lost 1 to Montana, 1 to Pennsylvania, and 1 to Florida. The rest of them, of the past interns, the rest of them remain here in Wyoming. Quick check-in with our strategic plan goals. We hosted 6 workshops, 3 unique topics. We've hosted a grand total of 11 interns. We have yet to host an intern from the Wind River Indian Reservations. We had several had interest from the Wind River Indian Reservation, and then COVID-19 hit, and that was put on Thank you very much. That's all I have to report on my arm.
Thanks, Trent. Continuing with workforce development, I'd like to introduce Dr. Dave Bowling, who is the director of Impact 307, which is formerly known as the Wyoming Technology Business Center, and that's how you'll see it referred to in our strategic plan. Over to you, Dave.
Impact 307 had the task of starting up 2 entrepreneurial launch pads or startup challenges within the EPSCoR grant. These were established both statewide, which was the Microbial Ecology Collaborative Startup Launchpad, and the Wind River Startup Challenge. This was a total of $50,000 divided in 2 for each year of 2 years of the grant. The first one was the Microbial Ecology Collaborative, which we called MEXL, and it was held the end of March, entirely virtually because of the outbreak of COVID-19 in the United States. We had 11 applicants, 4 finalists, and 3 winners, and the $25,000 for that portion was distributed as per what the independent judges thought the teams needed for working capital. In both cases, the Wind River Challenge and the MEXL Challenge were all distributed as working capital, not as awards or prizes. So there is a responsibility and accountability for that money towards the business. The second one was the Wind River Startup Challenge. This was a wide open challenge to any business proposal, but the principal members of the teams needed to be registered members of the Northern Arapaho or Eastern Shoshone tribes. In this case, we had, this was done on 30th of May of 2020 and was originally planned to be a large event, but because of COVID-19 was also held virtually, which was a challenge because of bandwidth considerations on the reservation. Again, this was a total pool of 25K. We had 20 applicants, which was incredible. 9 finalists and 5 winners. The 25K was split between the 5 winners as is shown on the slide, again, as working capital. 2 of the teams, the 2 largest teams of the both winners of the 10K have both started their business and are considering and are looking at hiring people now, even in the midst of COVID. So only 2 months after having the challenge, they're already moving forward. FY21 plans are to repeat both the MEXL and the Wind River Startup Challenge. We will launch both in the early fall within the next month, and with 4 to 6 months of working with finalists to make really good proposals using NSF I-Corps methodologies and Lean Launchpad to direct them and help them with their pitches. They will also be. We will plan to have them both virtually, although the Wind River, if the COVID-19 mitigates by the end of May, we will try to do that live. The future plans is to make these sustainable through local funding or statewide funding to get support to continue these on for a long time. We have applied for a broad federal EDA grant that could support some of this, especially all of the overhead will be supported if we win the EDA grant. Even so, we plan on doing this regardless. And this was our startup enterprise activity in progress. But other than that, then open to questions.
Thank you, Dave. We're going to transition now to our diversity program, and we will start with Lisa Abeda, who works out of our EPSCoR office as the coordinator of student programs. Lisa, on to you.
Thank you, Sarah. First, I will start with the high school program called the Summer Research Apprentice Program, also known as SRAP. Since 1985, we've had 539 participants complete the program. SRAP is a 6-week residential program. During this time, participants get a hands-on science experience. They live in the dorms, have various events on campus, allowing them to live the college life. On the weekends and the evenings, there are science-based and enrichment activities such as the UW Planetarium and behind-the-scenes tour of the zoo. For our recruitment component, participants attend plays in our theater department. We have guest speakers from admissions and scholarships department and tour the athletics facility. At the end of the 6 weeks, the participants present their research they've conducted. During this time, you can see their confidence levels have increased in their science-based knowledge. In the last 5 years, we have noticed more females are applying and are accepted into the program. Recruitment, specifically in Wyoming, I connect with and send program information to our high school teachers. I attend career fairs in the high schools on the Wind River Indian Reservation, and I also work with the coordinator of the Native American Summer Institute program on the UW campus to recruit participants who will attend both programs continuously, in which we coordinate our dates. Our participants conduct research in our micro research team's labs, and during the summer, they attend events and activities with our outreach partners. Through these uncertain times, our participants were able to learn from a distance. Most stated that they would like to apply for summer 2021 to get the on-campus experience. We learned a lot from this summer and would modify for summer 2021. If we have an online program, we would need to provide more information regarding the science kits and the importance of each piece. Participants asked for more clarifying information. Therefore, we also learned that our participants would benefit more from planned information Zoom meetings or lecture-style Zoom meetings. If we can have an in-person program next summer, we would continue in the ecology and biogeochemistry core lab, overseen by Jessica Kern. We would ask participants to mail samples prior to the arrival to the program to better broaden our knowledge of soils across the states. Just to reiterate, we had 11 participants who were able to have a science experience even in these uncertain times. Now on to the hard of hearing and deaf undergraduate internship. The internship was a byproduct of the previous grant. For recruitment, we are working with Dr. Caroline Solomon from Gallaudet University, who also recruits from Rochester Institute of Technology. The interns are on the UW campus for 10 weeks and earn upper division research credits supported by the UW admissions department. The interns gain hands-on lab experience in one of the labs of our micro research team. For this fall, I am working with the director of the University Disability Services to recruit UW undergraduate students. The internship may continue into the spring depending on how many hours the interns can spend in the labs in respect to COVID and the UW policy. We are hopeful that we can recruit from our partnering institution, Gallaudet University, for visiting students in summer 2021. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. We'll now transition to Renee Williams, who is the owner of 4th Street Studios in Laramie, Wyoming, and the mind behind Science Loves Art.
Welcome to my studio. I'm the artist on the EPSCoR National Science Foundation grant, micro grant, that studies the microbes in the soils across the state. Let me just tell you what we've done and what our goals are for the future. I've always been inspired by nature, plants, and science, and I've always loved working with scientists to get the message out about their work. So this project has been a challenge and also something that I love. So that's kind of my background. Science Loves Art began with a project with paleobotanists at the University of Wyoming. It was a concept, it was an idea for a project, and after that project was complete, I continued to work with other scientists with exhibits and outreach for their projects. But in year 2 of this project, we were granted 501c3 nonprofit status. So that has allowed us to receive more grant funding and more financial support to match what EPSCoR and National Science Foundation are doing. In year 1 of this project, I bought a camera and a microscope and began using them in tandem just to become more familiar with how to present small worlds and small images to the community. I also work with fused glass. I have a kiln, so I worked with the process to fuse the glass over a 48-hour period at extremely high temperatures to have the glass move. Then I used the microscope to take pictures of the glass through the microscope, and some beautiful images came up. So I used those images, printed them on metal prints, and used them in exhibits. And during glass workshops, we would talk about the movement of the microbes. The first 2 years, I just created more of this type of artwork and created exhibits for discussing and creating dialogue about the microbe project, the use of microbes and how the world is more than what we can see. We created an exhibit called Small Worlds, and this was part of that. So the first kit that we developed was based on the visual images of the microbes that we were looking at. And we thought this would be a dynamic and interesting way for the community and children of all ages with all levels of art skills or zero art background to experience something that would begin the discussion about talking about the microbes. So this is a suminagashi marbling technique, but it's a beautiful and very relaxing and enjoyable way to experience art and create and understand science. The second kit we're rolling out this year is a paint pour. All of the kits now are using reusable glass bottles and paper, so we can recycle, refill, and reuse all of the kits. They both have abstract shapes and forms that are created without the artist's intent. It's the science that creates it. So we talk about color theory, we talk about fluid dynamics, and we also talk about the inspiration of microbes with the movement of the shapes. Science Loves Art has reached over 2,500 kids in year 3 across the state of Wyoming. We have collaborators in over 13 counties, including Big Brothers Big Sisters, Boys and Girls Clubs, the Wind River Reservation. We have an elementary school there. We provided kits and art projects to every single child at that school. Rock Springs, Sheridan. We just sent out 30 paint pour kits to the statewide Big Brothers Big Sisters matches across Wyoming. So this is a project that the bigs and the littles do together. We were excited about our collaboration this year with Tacos Camp with Andrea Burrows, who is also on the outreach group of our micro grant. She was able to organize 5 groups to provide projects for a 5-day period to over 80 children in Wyoming. And we were very excited to be a part of this project and hope to continue in the future. Every year we're trying to have 3 or 4 annual events that will continue on. We're in our 2nd year of the Fermentation Festival. This year it will be in the street. We will have up to 15 vendors that include beer, wine, cheese, bread, anything microbe related, fermentation related. We use social media daily to communicate our efforts with not only the public, but also our collaborators across the state, and also the participants and the children and families and communities that receive the kits. We develop videos on YouTube and also try to have free downloadable projects.
Thanks for those great visuals, Renee. We're transitioning now to Dr. Kristen Landreville, who runs 2 different programs for us. She's faculty here at University of Wyoming in the Department of Communication and Journalism.
Thank you for that introduction. So I'm going to be talking about STEM journalism, the strategic plan check for this. The activity is to improve science reporting through traditional print and social media through internships and science communication workshops. So what we have done is created a science journalism internship program that runs in the summer for 12 weeks for UW students. And this summer we have 6 interns placed in media outlets in Wyoming. These include Wyoming Public Radio, 3 interns at Wyoming Press Association newspapers, including the Laramie Boomerang, the Rock Springs Rocket Miner, and the Jackson Hole News and Guide. We also have 1 intern at Western Confluence Science Journalism magazine as well. This summer, we also have financial support that we have provided to Wyoming Press Association newspapers for their mentorship of the science journalism interns. So we have paired mentors at 3 Wyoming Press Association newspapers. These include the Sheridan Press, the Casper Star-Tribune, and the Sundance Times. So we have journalists, science reporters, working with the science journalism interns at the other 3 newspapers that I just mentioned. This summer, we have had so far, as of July 31st, 55 science stories published by these interns. And we're really proud of this number. It's quite possible that these science stories may not have been published in Wyoming news outlets if it weren't for this internship program. Also, there will be 5 stories that will be published about the Track 1 science. I also wanted to update you about last year's internship program as well, which was the first year that it had started. Last year, we had 7 interns placed in media outlets in Wyoming. And on the bottom right there, you can see that this is a screenshot of Western Confluence magazine. We had an intern placed there. And on the right there, you can see that this is a screenshot of the story that she had written. She had several stories in the magazine. And this particular story actually features Track 1 scientists, so that's really exciting. We also had interns again at Wyoming Public Radio and 4 Wyoming Press Association newspapers. That included the Laramie Boomerang again, the Casper Star-Tribune, the Sheridan Press, and the Wyoming Tribune Eagle. Last year, we had 50 science stories over the course of 12 weeks that were published in Wyoming news outlets. We also, this is very exciting, had half of the interns that ended up getting hired at their media outlets after the internship in the summer had concluded. We had 13 science journalism interns total across the 2 summers so far. I also taught a media science and society class that instructed these interns about science journalism. And so they were educated about the ins and outs of science journalism before they went to their internships. And also this class was open to UW students. So we had 55 University of Wyoming students join that class in addition to the interns. We also had that new partnership with WPA this summer that I mentioned, where we're pairing those interns at their home newspapers with these mentorship reporters at their newspapers. And so we're really, I think, doing a great job at building a lot of community here with the University of Wyoming, the papers in the state, the Press Association, Wyoming Public Radio. So I think we're doing a great job with that. We also had 5 presentations that were presented at the WPA conventions this year as well as last year. And these were professional development sessions where we were instructing journalists and editors across the state about how to improve the science journalism that they produce at their papers. And then last here, for the activity of statewide examples of microbial ecology communication will be rewarded. Progress on that includes the creation of a Wyoming EPSCoR Best of Science Reporting Award. So we created this award, and journalists around the state submit their best pieces of science reporting to the panel of judges who review these stories and then decide on the winner. This year, we had 21 Wyoming journalists from 14 different Wyoming Press Association newspapers submit their work for the judges to examine. And this is an improvement from last year, where we had 11 journalists submit stories. So I think that's great progress in the sense that the word is getting out about how this award values science journalism. Hopefully it's encouraging our journalists to produce more science journalism, but also stronger science journalism too. So I'm really excited that we have lots of science being featured around the state, and our interns are doing a great job at producing some. And this award, I think, does encourage stronger science journalism in the state. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm really excited to hear about your questions for me. Thank you.
That was really informative. We're going to turn to Jackie Clancher now, who is a longtime EPSCoR partner. She is faculty at Central Wyoming Community College, and not only is she partnering with us on this Track 1 award, but has partnered with us on a previous Track 1 award. So over to you, Jackie.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Sarah. I oversee the Education, Outreach, and Diversity STEM engagement within Central Wyoming College, located in Lander, Wyoming, and across the community colleges throughout the state. My primary area of oversight is a year-long undergraduate research program called the Interdisciplinary Climate Change Expedition, or ICE. The premier ICE event each summer is a 2-week backcountry expedition to the Dinwiddie Glacier on Wyoming's Continental Divide. ICE is rather unique in that it provides field-based micro-research opportunities primarily for first and second year college students that would be unlikely to have an opportunity to experience anything like this without EPSCoR support. ICE fulfills our EPSCoR commitments by providing this opportunity for students to design and implement a field-based microbiological research project and to then present their work at an academic conference. The population I work with tends to find mountains and magic first, and then, fairly consistently, albeit sometimes to their surprise, STEM. Our first micro expedition launched during the summer of 2018 with 3 students working with a University of Wyoming PhD student to sample and assess changes in the microbiome of high elevation alpine soils. These research students developed hypotheses, performed field sampling, participated in analysis of the results, and presented at Undergraduate Research and Inquiry Day in Laramie in spring 2019. The ICE micro program has 2 major components: the micro-glaciohydrologic arm, whose goal is to compare and contrast microbial communities across elevation and plant communities, and ICE archaeology, which uses microbial sampling and analysis to provide evidence of human use and occupation of high elevation communities. In 2019, CWC hosted 2 14-day field-based micro-expeditions, one targeting primarily CWC students and one focusing on recruiting students and faculty from other community colleges. Prior to the expedition, students participated in a 5-day training program, including 1 full day of background lecture in microbiological foundations, field sampling, and related methodology. This second-year program created research opportunities for a total of 17 students. And in addition to the long-standing CWC faculty team, 3 new faculty participated in the expedition, 1 from outside CWC and 2 from within. At present, excitedly and happily, we recruit more students than we are actually able to serve in wilderness environs. So what do we get out of this program? A very high transfer rate to STEM programs at the University of Wyoming, a book chapter summarizing our work, a college-level course in mountain environments and ecology, some spectacular web resources, and some very solid student-produced digital summaries called story maps. In 2019, we promoted our work in rather unconventional means, a rock concert and fundraiser by the band Portugal the Man. The band promoted our student research by hosting a combined rock concert and viewing of the ice-focused film Glaciers of the Winds. 6 student posters were on display that evening to over 500 people, and I think we can safely say this was no ordinary evening of scientific presentation. The next day, students capped off this extravaganza with a visit from Senator Sheldon Whitehouse from Rhode Island. He visited the students at the trailhead, and all student teams presented an overview of their work to the senator. 2020 brought COVID and changed everything for our field-based program. We called our COVID response Field to Front Country, and instead of putting 35 students, faculty, and visiting researchers into the mountains, we developed an online 4-credit program that mixed intense geospatial science study with mountain ecology, a small and socially distanced field-based repeat photography expedition, and a course in interpretive communications with a science emphasis. We started the summer with a total of 16 students, and we have 13 students slated to complete all of the courses in which they enrolled. What next for us? Back into the field for 2021, eager and rejuvenated. Thank you so much.
Thanks for that, Jackie. Next, we're going to Dr. Shannon Albeck, who is a research scientist at the Wyoming Geographic Information Science Center and the lead of our data discovery.
Hello, for this portion of the presentation, I'm going to be speaking to you about creating lesson plans for STEM secondary teachers through the use of data corral for teaching data collection and analysis with some data science techniques. This work is comprised of two teams. We have the development team, which has built the data corral web API and front-end web interface. That team is led by myself, Shannon Albeck, with Nick Case and Samantha Ewers being YGISC staff members, as well as 2 undergraduate students who are doing the bulk of the upgrades to data corral, Will Patrick and Garrett Burrows, who you'll see student presentations from at another time. And then the education team is led by Dr. Andrea Burrows, and for this past year, 3 secondary science teachers, pre-service secondary science teachers, Nicole Marsh, John Palmquist, and Razna Menendhar, worked on weekends for the entire spring semester to develop some lesson plans using data corral that are targeting upper elementary, middle, and high school students and teachers. So their main goal, the education group's main goal, was to answer the question of how do teachers begin to collect data and analyze big information, large amounts of data to meet the next generation science standards for engineering practices and develop STEM lesson plans. They did this through a workflow where they would search data corral, pick real world data, wild-caught data that is what's in data corral. They would connect this data to a STEM classroom and build a lesson around that. So if we were to do a little demo of what the data corral is and what these STEM teachers would find, we would land on the home page where we have 3 sections. Data discovery tool, where folks can try to search for and find existing data. An education portal that has access to all the lesson plans that these pre-service teachers have developed, and then the lab inventory management system, which you'll see a presentation of later at another time. So if we were to use the data corral, it is a geosemantic search tool, so you can locate information by space and seeing where specific locations where information is, or just in general data types themselves. So we have multiple filters you can search for, or you can just use keywords. So if we were to type temperature, we could subset our data and see all the multitude of data sets that exist from our researchers across multiple projects, including this EPSCoR micro grant. So if we were to say, let's investigate, I'm a teacher, I want to investigate air temperature, and I want to look at air temperature for use in a curriculum or an assignment. So we can go to, if we click on temperature, we would instantly jump you to this page where it starts to summarize this information for you in an aggregate fashion, so it's a little easier to look at. So in this case, we're looking at air temperature aggregated by month across, looks like a fairly short time interval. We can add confidence intervals to our points. We can change this to a weekly time step, so we can see changes through the week. It's interactive, so as you hover, the data that makes these plots adjust to where your mouse cursor is. You can change to a box plot. So we're hoping that this visualization of the data helps develop the ability of students to understand some of the statistics and variance. You can also scroll down and they can filter and download the raw data that is creating the information that is presented here in these charts. And then to wrap up, if we were to go to the education component, we have these lesson plans that have been built for middle school and high school students at this point in time to improve using data corral and improving upon STEM development for classrooms. these are all open, also open source. And with these lesson plans, we have met these objectives within the activities of the strategic plan. So with that, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Shannon. Last but not least, we have our very own Emily Burko, who is our Director of Education, Outreach, and Diversity, to summarize all the different areas of interest that we have in project elements that you haven't heard about yet. Emily.
Thanks, Sarah. As Sarah mentioned, my role today in our conversation is to capture the projects that you haven't heard, specifically in and around workforce and economic development and education. We initially started a project that put Wyoming microscientists in collaboration with local breweries. The goal was to collaborate to explore microbial interactions at various points of the brewing process. The partnership generated a lot of interest with scientists, as one might imagine, as well as the breweries. We wanted to know whether we could make cleaner, more interesting flavors and all around better beer. After some initial enthusiasm, we learned that this partnership may not be able to move forward because of potential competitive advantage issues. One of our major partners in the brewing industry said that they weren't able to work with us because the scientists could have so much access and information to the back-end process, the recipes, and they didn't feel like it was legally appropriate to provide that information for us. So we have a big red stop sign on our strategic plan check and are trying to figure out how best to move forward or if that partnership can be continued. One project that's going very well and moving forward is our partnership with the Wyoming State Science Fair. So each spring, microscientists, whether that is PIs, graduate students, postdocs, work with the Wyoming State Science Fair coordinator to select a student or a group of students, a project that would win a mini internship, which is a week-long experience with the students, their teacher, and then labs on the micro project. And the students come to Laramie to learn about their topic, so their topic for the science fair, get a little bit deeper into some of the questions they're trying to answer, and then also work with the state science fair coordinator to develop their presentation and their project a little bit further so that they're prepared to take the question a little deeper in the next year's science fair. Thus far, we've had 3 students join us here in Laramie, both in the Weinig lab and the Van Diepen lab, and they've done field work. They've worked with undergraduate and graduate students, and it's been a really nice opportunity to show these high school students what it looks like to come to UW to work in labs with us and maybe encourage them to participate further, join us on the project in future years. Incidentally, our first group of interns were a pair of sisters who worked in the Weinig lab, and you see them here. These students took their science fair project further the next year and won the senior division for microbiology, and were invited to participate in ISEF, which is the International Science and Engineering Fair. And that's kind of a big deal for high school students and certainly in the science fair world. I think also bigger deal was their research around air quality in their school, and the work that they've done has led to a whole new HVAC system being placed in the high school as well as other schools in their district, and other students are measuring air quality within the school's heating and cooling systems. This year, we have 2 high school students from Newcastle, Wyoming, slated to join us, but because of the COVID restrictions on campus, we were not able to bring them on this summer. So currently, we're exploring different ways to get them to campus, whether that is virtually or in the fall, depending on how the opening of the university and their school district goes. They are going to be working on bioplastics and the breakdown of bioplastics using microbial solutions with Jessica Kern in the Eco-Biogeochemistry lab. So a quick science fair strategic plan check. We are on track. We're bringing students in. We're going to figure out what to do with the students that won the mini internship this summer. But as soon as school opens up and the university opens up and we're able to safely bring students here, I think it'll be easy to recruit future interns here while still meeting the needs of our current interns. We also provide awards to junior science fair divisions of the middle school students who do work that is somehow connected to microbial ecology, microbes, data science, or biology that are meritorious and connected to the project. And thus far, we've had 9 students receive awards for their work that potentially could tie to micro. The next partnership I'd like to touch on is our collaboration with the University of Wyoming and undergraduate research and inquiry days. This is a partnership that has been long-standing, over 20 years with the University of Wyoming, but we also pull in students from across campus. We pull in students from the Hard of Hearing and some of the other programs that if they overlap during the semester, we ask that they present at inquiry days. We have our undergrads from the micro labs present as well. This project, the duration of the Track 1 project has been 2 years. And I have 2 years of data that we've had over 1,000 participants join us to present their research. We're working on becoming more inclusive. So right now we're about 10% of our total participation coming from community college students. We're also trying to look at bringing in more of the humanities, social science, and non-STEM majors. Our 3 to 5 year goal is to have EPSCoR support, but also transition the program into the research office fully so that it is more inclusive of activities across campus. It is an activity that is sustained in perpetuity and not somehow connected to or tied to grant funding. We just think it's a better fit to be working with the research office. The event is held at the end of April each year, and this year, because of COVID, we had to cancel. Again, we're on track, we're doing well. It's a hugely popular program, so we feel very comfortable that when students are able to come back and present, or if we build an online research celebration, it will be well attended, well populated. Several students have this as a requirement for graduation, so I think we've got a captive audience and feel pretty confident that the future will be bright. The last project I wanted to touch on is one you'll be hearing about in the student section. And this is an art and science collaboration called Microbestiary, overseen by Erin Bentley, who is a graduate student of Alex Berkeley's. And this is a way for the community as well as K-12 students to engage with microbes in kind of a creative and inviting manner. And again, this is just an opportunity to introduce and invite the community into the world of microbes and microbial ecology. We initially funded this project for years 4 and 5, but through matching funds and additional grants, we're able to start this partnership earlier. And so it's just a great partnership collaboration that we think will continue to grow as years 4 and 5 of this project evolve. On behalf of the others in the project elements section, we'd like to thank you for your attention and look forward to answering any questions you have about this presentation or our projects on August 31st.